Welcome back to the Snap. Michael Heaver here alongside my co-host Patrick O'Flynn, of course. And Patrick, the Labour fallout from that disastrous set of election results for Keir Starmer still playing out now.
Yes, absolutely. Every day seems to bring worse headlines. One former political veteran, Dennis Healey from the 1970s, had something called the Dennis Healey Law of Holes, which was if you're in one, stop digging. Well, Keir Starmer clearly hasn't learned that lesson because he went from his very poor TV clip to the Angela Rayner farce, where initially he said he'd take responsibility, then he tried to fit her up as a scapegoat, and that threw his whole shadow cabinet reshuffle out of kilter. He seems basically to have had to pull the plug on any other big changes apart from dumping Annalise Dodds. So he's actually lost more authority. And, you know, in a stare down with Angela Rayner, you know, she's one hands down and she's now got more titles than the average African dictator.
Well, it seemed to me that this entire so-called reshuffle really is a complete and utter waste of time and was more trouble than it's really worth. And of course, we saw John Trickett, a Labour MP, I think one of the first now, that's Opie tweeted out, I don't think we should rule out a leadership challenge. So that now already, and this was even quicker than I predicted, already now you're seeing the prospect of a leadership challenge to Keir Starmer being discussed. And it seems to me, Patrick, as I repeat, that this whole so-called reshuffle has actually further exposed Starmer and his team's complete ineptitude.
I think so, and it reminds us that Keir Starmer is a bit of a political rookie. He became leader a year ago after only 5 years as an MP and had never been employed in politics before that. And one of the things you learn in politics is after a grueling election campaign, particularly one that ends disappointingly, the two things you really need to do are have a rest and have a think, not launch into a reactive, half-baked manoeuvre such as a back-of-the-envelope cabinet reshuffle, because that's liable to involve, you know, decisions which aren't carefully thought through and can go wrong. I mean, I've suffered that myself back in 2015 when everyone at the top of UKIP fell out. And another parallel would be after the referendum, Michael Gove and Boris Johnson, clearly both a bit tired and emotional, stabbed each other in the back and the front, and we ended up with 3 years of Theresa May. So it's very important just to take a few days, rest, think, come up with a coherent plan, stress test it with your aides, and move forward coherently. And Starmer hasn't done that.
What's really interesting, Patrick, all of this is that we're not going to have long to find out if Labour have learned any lessons at all, because there's going to be another electoral contest. Tracy Braven, currently the Labour MP for Batley and Spen, elected as the first mayor of West Yorkshire in that race, meaning that she's going to have to resign her Westminster seat, which means another Labour defence at a by-election. And I would put it to you, Patrick, that if the Conservatives were to gain that seat off of Labour as well, it really would be curtains for Keir Starmer's leadership.
I think he'd be in desperate straits, and you'd probably say from here and now, the Tories would be slight favourite in that seat. There are different local factors than there were in Hartlepool. It's not quite such a heavy Leave seat, although it is a Leave seat. The fact is, as we sit here today, you'd probably say the Tories are favourites to win that. If they do that, then it's really free fall for Starmer.
And when you look at the terrible Labour performance at the elections, there's two key examples we can really talk about. First of all, if you look in Rotherham, you see an unbelievable, I mean, I've never really seen anything like this before, where the Conservatives went from having 0 councillors in Rotherham to 20 councillors in the space of one election. And Patrick, there were also some dramatic results in Bristol as well.
Yeah, in Bristol, you had the Greens surging and adding lots of councillors at Labour's expense. And this really illustrates the pincer movement that Labour is caught in. Down in Bristol, the sort of Trustafarian belt, you'd say, and more kind of eco-conscious left graduates, Labour are losing out to the Greens. So they can't just, post Keir Starmer in front of a union flag and singing the national anthem, because they'll lose voters on that side of their coalition, and that's 2/3 of their vote. So I think you can see there that there's no easy answer whatsoever for the Labour Party.
Yeah, as I said, in Bristol, you've got the situation is that Labour lost control of Bristol City Council. They've now got 24 councillors there. That's down from 33. Hit very hard by the Green Party, who also now have 24 councillors. So the Greens and Labour now have the same number of councillors on Bristol City Council, and the Green Party surging up 11. And you just think, Patrick, I know it's something you've talked about before. I mean, in terms of the Green Party potentially, how big a chunk out of Labour left-wing support do you think they can take?
I think they're going to have a poll surge because they've done very well for profile out of these elections. Labour morale is obviously low. Some people on the Labour left are really taken against Keir Starmer. So it wouldn't surprise me at all that the next set of opinion polls from half a dozen pollsters will show the Greens up, and that's going to be at the further expense of the Labour Party. Meanwhile, I think we'll see a bit of a Boris bounce again for the Tories. So that gap in the next few polls between the Tories and Labour could be absolutely enormous. And I think equally people will be looking at Keir Starmer's personal ratings, which have been in trouble all year. But I think they could be about to get dramatically worse. So there we see again this trouble. If an opposition leader loses momentum and starts backsliding, they can get into a tailspin, and it's desperately difficult to get out of it.
And finally, Patrick, we sort of three key contests that we highlighted and that people talked about. With Tees Valley, the mayoral race there, where you saw the Conservative Ben Hoochin re-elected with 73% of the vote. You also obviously had Hartlepool. Tories won that constituency for the first ever time. And the third one being the West Midlands mayoral race, where in the first round, Andy Street up 6.9% from last time. He nearly won it on the first round, actually. He got 48.7% of the vote in the first round, went to the second round, and he won that as well with 54%. And I know it's been talked about a lot already, but it's hard to overemphasize just how far the Labour Party are from winning the next election when they lost in Tees Valley, lost in Hartlepool, and lost in the West Midlands.
Absolutely, and the West Midlands is one of the biggest areas for traditional Tory Labour marginals. And yet we've seen further progress for the Conservatives, not quite as dramatic as in the Tees Valley and Hartlepool, but still another big stride forward, a very comfortable winning margin for Andy Street. And he improved his showing in all parts of the West Midlands, but again, particularly significant in the Black Country boroughs like Dudley and Sandwell, which cover towns such as, West Bromwich, Dudley itself, Rowley Regis, Tipton. You're seeing those towns culturally, I think, move towards becoming safe Conservative seats. So again, in the traditional marginal battlegrounds, it looks to me like the Tories are taking a really firm grip on seats that Labour would need to be winning to be anywhere close to becoming the largest party in the next Parliament.
Absolutely, and it's interesting to think, not long ago we saw one of the front pages, Boris on the ropes. It certainly appears to me that actually it's Starmer on the ropes. Lots going on, guys, so make sure you hit subscribe and the bell so you don't miss the next episode of The Snap, and me and Patrick will see you again soon.
See you soon.